in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. In my past life, my cousin, Sylvia Lynn, took my place and became the young lady of the Prime Minister's manor. However, the manor was governed by strict rules. Sylvia Lynn endured endless contemptuous gazes and harsh treatment within its walls, only to be married off to a poor scholar in the end. As for me, I was sold by our aunt to the Biwa pavilion for silver to raise her son, eventually becoming a famous courtesan renowned in the pleasure quarters. Ultimately, I caught the eye of Prince Don, who bought my freedom, and I became his favored concubine in the princely manor. Many years later, Sylvia Lynn and I met again. Seeing me adorned in lavish silks, she was consumed by jealousy, and hatred, so she tricked me into going near the lake, pushing me into the water to drown. The day I returned to the Prime Minister's manor, my cousin Sylvia, ignoring Aunt Lynn's attempts to stop her, pushed me outside. Little sister, in this life, let me be the prince's favored concubine. You can go and live with that destitute scholar. Seeing Sylvia's bite and ambition, I had to laugh. Did she really think becoming the top courtesan of the pavilion was so easy? Did she believe becoming the prince's favorite was so simple? In our previous life, my parents had been on their way to chop wood in the forest when they encountered the Prime Minister's wife, Madame Shen, and her maid being attacked by bandits. My parents created a diversion, allowing Madame Shen to escape, but they were cut down and killed by the robbers. Madame Shen wished to repay this debt of life, intending to adopt me as her goddaughter and bring me back to the manor to be raised. However, my aunt craved the glory and riches of the Prime Minister's manor, so she had her own daughter, Sylvia, impersonate me. Sylvia stared blankly around the dilapidated room, not yet grasping that she had been reborn, before her mother pulled her aside to give instructions. At that very moment, my hands and feet were bound tightly with rope, and a dark cloth was stuffed in my mouth, a black gag. "Sylvia, my dear, your fortunate day has arrived," Aunt Lynn whispered. "In a moment, when Madame Shen arrives, you only need to say that your name is Clara Lynn. From this day forward, I am no longer your mother, but merely your aunt, do you understand?" After speaking, my aunt kicked me viciously. "You wretched brat! You better cooperate. If you dare ruin my daughter's bright future, just wait and see how I'll deal with you." That kick brought me to my full senses. I had truly been reborn. Sylvia, however, clearly ignored her mother's instructions. She pinched her own arm hard, wincing and grimacing from the pain, but then she leaped up in celebration. "I'm back. I'm truly back." Our aunt, displeased, smacked her. "Did you even hear what I just told you? Let me be clear, I am already pregnant with your little brother. When you are prosperous in the future, you must not forget to help your own flesh and blood brother." Sylvia suppressed her euphoria and nodded obediently. However, when Aunt Lynn led Madame Shen into the room, Sylvia suddenly untied me and pushed me forward. "She is the one who is Clara Lynn. You must take her away." Aunt Lynn's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Madame Shen spoke calmly. "Good child, you lost your parents so young. From now on, follow me back to the Shen manor, and I promise I will not treat you unfairly." I merely nodded innocently. Seeing this, Aunt Lynn knew the situation was irreversible and could only glare helplessly at her own daughter. Sylvia, her eyes brimming with tears, turned to Madame Shen and said with earnest sincerity, "Madame, my little sister's parents lost their lives to save you. If I were to shamelessly steal her identity at a time like this, how could my aunt and uncle's spirits possibly rest in peace in heaven?" Madame Shen shot Aunt Lynn a single, meaningful glance. Aunt Lynn was so frightened she immediately fell to her knees, her back instantly damp with cold sweat. "Please forgive me, madam. This lowly woman was temporarily blinded by greed. I beg for your understanding and mercy." "Very well," Madame Shen said, then nodded in praise at Sylvia. "You have not done a bad job teaching your daughter. A bottomless pit of greed will only harm oneself. Do not let this happen again." Yes, Aunt Lynn stammered timidly. Madame Shen then handed Sylvia Lynn 2 taels of silver. "If you face hardships in the future, you may come to the Shen manor and find me." Sylvia nodded her head vigorously, visibly excited. In her past life she had spent day and night beside Madame Shen, so she naturally knew what words pleased her, and what to say to curry favor. This act was simply securing an extra layer of insurance for herself. She stood in a corner, hidden from the others' view, and shot me a look filled with smugness and provocation. As soon as Aunt Lynn saw the silver, she happily kowtowed twice to Madame Shen. While I was packing my belongings in the room, Sylvia crept in. She vaguely tried to probe me about events from our past life, but I pretended to be deaf and mute, avoiding the topic. Seeing me look back blankly as if I understood nothing, she couldn't help but sneer. With a personality like yours, you'll be hated in the Shen Manor far more than I ever was. Don't you dare think you're actually some young lady of high birth. They are only taking you in because they fear being labeled ungrateful and heartless. You really believe they will treat you with kindness? A wild pheasant will always be a wild pheasant. So stop dreaming of turning into a phoenix. You will soon learn just how hypocritical the Prime Minister and his wife are. They say one thing to your face and another behind your back. Their daughter, Bella Shen, is arrogant beyond measure, looking down on everyone. You won't be able to endure her spoiled temperament. Just you wait. You'll spend your days living under their scorn and mockery. I suddenly saw the corner of a precious silk robe just outside the doorway, and I couldn't stop myself from raising my voice. What nonsense are you speaking? Anyone can tell Madame Shen is a good person, so her daughter must be a good person too. From now on, she will be my older sister. And I will not allow you to slander them like that. Sylvia let out a shrill laugh, her voice grating. Good people. You absolute fool. By the time they have tormented you until there is nothing left but your bones, you will understand whether my words today were true or false. You think you are climbing to a high branch. It is a pit of fire, and you just wait for the tears. The moment she finished speaking, a soft cough was heard from outside the door. The matron who attended Madame Shen stepped inside, her face like a sheet of ice. Her sharp gaze swept over Sylvia's suddenly pale expression. Madame has sent this old servant to inquire if young Miss Clara has finished her preparations. The matron's voice was calm but left no room for rebuttal. Furthermore, this old servant wishes to offer a word of advice to Miss Sylvia. What goes on in the Prime Minister's manor is not for outsiders to discuss. Since Madame has accepted young Miss Clara, she will undoubtedly treat her as her own flesh and blood. If anyone in the manor dares to show disrespect, they will be punished according to the household law. Sylvia's face flushed red and then drained to white, her lips trembling so much she couldn't utter a single word. All the smugness and provocation from moments before had vanished, leaving only fear and humiliation. I bowed my head, hiding the faint smile playing on my lips. I had seen that silk robe earlier. Indeed, Sylvia, even after being reborn, you still haven't fixed that hot-tempered and reckless mouth of yours. The matron paid her no further attention and turned to me, her expression softening considerably. Young miss, do you require any help? Thank you, matron, but I have already finished packing. I lifted my small, worn-out bundle, which contained only 2 sets of patched clothing. That was the entirety of my worldly possessions. A flash of pity crossed the matron's eyes, and her voice became even gentler. In that case, please follow this old servant. Madame is waiting in the carriage. I nodded, taking one last look at this dilapidated thatched hut, at Aunt Lynn's ashen face, and at Sylvia's look of unconcealed panic. As we settled into the carriage, the matron immediately recounted everything she had just heard to Madame Shen. Madame Shen's beautiful brows furrowed slightly. I had originally thought that child was kind-hearted. It seems some character traits are truly bone deep and cannot be changed. She then turned to look at me, and her eyes held a new layer of affection. You are just like your parents, brave and virtuous. I am accepting you as my goddaughter. From now on, your name will be Clara Shen. In that instant, all the favorable impressions that Sylvia had worked so hard to build in front of Madame Shen completely evaporated. As the Shen Manor's carriage departed, I looked out the window and saw Sylvia's face, contorted with unwillingness and resentment. Aunt Lynn had her by the ear, her shrill voice cursing. You truly are a curse. Even now, the suffocating sensation of drowning in my past life still fills me with fear. How laughable. On what grounds did Sylvia think I would simply stand by and allow her to construct that facade of a good person? In front of Madame Shen, Aunt Lynn had always favored boys over girls. All the heavy, filthy chores in the house fell to me, yet I was still beaten and scolded all day long. After she gave birth to Sylvia's younger brother, she sold me to the Baiwa Pavilion in exchange for silver to raise her son. This time, I will let her own precious daughter experience that fate for herself. The Shen Manor's carriage swayed for 2 shichen, nearly 4 hours, traveling from the barren countryside to the prosperous city streets, finally stopping before the imposing and magnificent Prime Minister's manor. Beside the gate, a young girl with her hair tied in 2 buns poked her head out. Her whole body was adorned in fine silks and brocades, her hair decorated with dangling jade and pearl hairpins. She looked to be a little older than me. The moment she saw Madame Shen, she rushed forward. "Mother, you have returned. Who is that young lady? Why are her clothes so filthy? Did you pick her up from somewhere?" I felt a little awkward. Madame Shen chided, pinching her cheek. "From now on, she is your little sister." Bella nodded, seeming to half understand. "Then, can I give my clothes to little sister to wear?" In my past life, this exact sentence had struck a deep blow to Sylvia's fragile, glass-like heart. She had always believed that Bella was intentionally trying to make her lose face, deliberately offering her cast-off clothing. But I did not see it that way. In my past life at the pavilion, I was forced to wear revealing dancing costumes, enduring the naked stares and crude remarks from the patrons below the stage. At that time, I truly wished someone would just give me a set of clothes decent enough to cover my body. I smiled and said, "Thank you, big sister. You are so good. You treat me very well." Bella blushed slightly, looking like an exquisite porcelain doll, as she slipped a gold bracelet from her own wrist onto mine. "It is nothing. You are my little sister. Whatever I have, you shall have a share of too." I truly could not understand how such an enthusiastic and generous young lady could, in Sylvia's words, become an arrogant snob who looked down on everyone. Madame Shen had already arranged a private room for me, and even assigned several maids and a nanny to take care of my daily life. On the table in the room, there were already plates of fruits and snacks that children loved. "If you are lacking anything, you must speak up," Madame Shen instructed. "Why don't you take the luminous pearl from your room and give it to your little sister? That way, she won't be afraid when she sleeps alone at night," Bella proposed. Madame Shen laughed cheerfully. "Is that not your most precious treasure? You never let anyone else even touch it, and now you want to gift it to your little sister." I felt it was far too valuable and quickly waved my hands. "I am not afraid to sleep alone, big sister. You should keep the luminous pearl for yourself. It does not matter what you think. I want to do this, so I will. I simply want to give it to you." This domineering yet sweet affection from the young lady warmed my heart. In the previous life, Sylvia had refused Bella's clothes, and as a result, their relationship was never good. Bella never offered her the luminous pearl. At night, staring into the pitch-black room, Sylvia had tried to use the debt owed for my parents' sacrifice to demand the luminous pearl for herself. Because of this, the two of them had a falling out. When Madame Shen saw her own daughter being wronged, a knot formed in her heart regarding Sylvia, and she no longer paid her much mind. After that, Sylvia returned home, complaining to Aunt Lin that no one in the Shen family liked her. She said the room was too large, and she was terrified sleeping at night. She was scared to death. In this life, Madame Shen also hired a strict matron to teach me etiquette. She held a disciplinary ruler in her hand, correcting my every posture and movement. Any mistake was met with a swift rap. It was not overly painful, but it was certainly enough to make me focus. This matron had once served in the palace. For Madame Shen to have invited her to the manor, she must have expended considerable effort. "You must not blame me for being severe. This place is not like your aunt's home. The moment you step outside this manor, countless eyes will be upon you. If you speak improperly or act without courtesy, your reputation will be completely ruined." Madame Shen took a jar of the finest ointment and carefully dabbed it onto the red welts the ruler had left on my hands. "Though it is quite arduous, you must try your best. Once you have passed this stage, everything will be much better," I replied softly. "Mother, I do not feel as arduous at all. I know you are doing this for my own good." This was the first time I had called her mother. Madame Shen froze for a moment, her heart clearly stirred. I told her that, to me, this place was like a heavenly palace. I no longer had to wake up at the crack of dawn to go out and cut grass for the pigs, nor did I have to feed the chickens, and ducks, and then prepare 3 meals a day for my aunt's family, only to curl up in a corner afterward to eat their spoiled leftovers. I no longer had to wash their clothes in the biting cold winter, my hands and feet cracking open from the chill, only to be scolded by my aunt for wasting water. After listening to this, Madame Shen's eyes turned red. She gently pulled me into her embrace. "My dear child, you have suffered far too much. From this day forward, this is your home. No one can bully you ever again." Her arms were warm and soft, carrying a gentle scent of sandalwood. Here, I only needed to learn the etiquette and skills that a lady of the inner chambers should know, all under the matron's guidance. In return, I could eat delicious food, wear beautiful clothes, and live without a single worry. When I did well in my studies, Madame Shen and Bella would even give me jewelry as a reward. Madame Shen even allowed me to attend the academy to learn how to read. These were things I could not even beg for in my previous life. Yet now, I had obtained everything with ease. It was a divine existence, and yet, Sylvia had been completely unhappy living it. She found learning to read too exhausting, insisting that woman without talent is a virtuous woman, and believed Madame Shen was trying to harm her. She felt that the Prime Minister's position was second only to the Emperor, so there was no need to learn etiquette just to curry favor with other young ladies. She believed it was just a tactic Madame Shen used to torment her. Most ridiculously, she tried to seduce the sons of high-ranking officials, but every attempt ended with her becoming a laughingstock. In the end, she became infatuated with a poor scholar. Ignoring everyone's advice, she stubbornly ran away with him. As a result, she could not adapt to a life of poverty, and tried to return to the Shen Manor, only to be refused entry. She then began to spread rumors that the Shen Manor saw her as a burden, which is why they married her off to that poor scholar. She claimed they promised to adopt her as a goddaughter, yet wouldn't even let her through the gates. Madame Shen was finally provoked by her, and she explained the entire sequence of events from beginning to end, leaving Sylvia with not a shred of dignity. She was criticized by the world, scorned like a rat crossing the street, and eventually abandoned by her own husband, living out her days in a gloomy haze. As for me, after being sold to the Baiwa Pavilion, I learned to sing and to dance. On the day my training was complete, a single performance of my drum dance caused all the young masters in the capital to throw money like water, silver hairpins tapping. The beat to shattering point, my deep red silk skirt stained with spilled wine. I became known as the #1 beauty of the capital, and eventually, I caught the eye of Prince Dawn, who took me as his concubine. It was only after Sylvia saw my glorious rise that she truly went mad and committed murder. On the day of the flower viewing banquet, I wore a new azure dress that Madame Shen had custom made for me, along with a butterfly hairpin gifted by Bella. Although I was not as adorned with bright jewels as the other young ladies, my appearance was fresh and graceful. I kept my lessons on etiquette firmly in mind, neither talking too much nor overdoing my actions, always staying right beside Bella, simply smiling and listening. When someone asked me a question, I replied with a few modest words, exactly as the matron had instructed. When it came to the poetry recital, I only recited a simple poem about flowers that Bella had taught me. It was not outstanding, but it was safe. Bella acted like a mother hen protecting her chick, always keeping me by her side. If anyone tried to approach and scrutinize me, she would deftly block them. The entire banquet passed smoothly. Because of my obedient, quiet, and polite demeanor, I even earned nods of approval from several of the attending madams. On the carriage ride back to the manor, Bella was even happier than I was. You see, I told you it would be fine. My little sister truly did so well today. Madame Shen also smiled and nodded in agreement. Clara was very composed and proper today, for her very first banquet. To behave like that is excellent. Her eyes showed genuine satisfaction. I knew that I had taken my first step firmly. At least I was not like Sylvia in the past life, who had become a laughingstock right from the very beginning. When Prime Minister Shen returned to the manor after court, he saw his wife and daughter laughing merrily in the courtyard and felt a sense of surprise. His wife's temperament had always been cold and distant, often like ice. He and his wife lived together with politeness and courtesy, but not much affection. His daughter, Bella, also preferred to cling to her mother. Every time he returned home, the manor was quiet, lacking vitality. But ever since they adopted this goddaughter, the Shen Manor had suddenly become much more lively. At that moment, Bella was excitedly chattering to me about a beautiful hairpin she had seen on another young lady at the banquet, saying she wanted to have a similar one made for me. I, meanwhile, was silently peeling a grape, placing the translucent fruit into Madame Shen's mouth. She lowered her head slightly to accept it, her gaze filled with warmth. Father. Bella, with her sharp eyes, was the first to spot him, running over cheerfully like a little bird. Madame Shen and I also rose to our feet. Lord Shen, you have returned. Madame Shen's voice was mild. I knelt down to offer a formal greeting, my posture perfect, my voice clear yet gentle. Clara pays her respects to father. The Prime Minister looked at the young girl before him, noting her clear eyes and refined gestures, and gave a slight nod. You may rise. His voice was calm, but his gaze softened somewhat. Within our own home, there is no need for such formalities. It seems you are all living together very well. Madame Shen offered a rare, genuine smile. Clara is a very understanding child, and she learns quickly. Even the matron praises her for being diligent. Bella immediately jumped in. It's true, father. Little sister is incredibly smart. The characters the tutor teaches her, she remembers them after just one lesson. She's much better than I was before. And she even keeps the luminous pearl I gave her right by her bedside, saying that way it feels like I am right there with her. Her voice was filled with pride, as if she were the one being praised herself. I adopted a look of timely embarrassment and said softly, "It is only because big sister and mother treat me so wonderfully." The Prime Minister observed this entire scene, and the faint feeling of discomfort he had about an outsider entering his family dissipated completely. A harmonious family leads to prosperity in all things. This child was grateful and had a calm temperament. Both his wife and daughter were fond of her. This was excellent. I knew then that this meant I had truly been accepted by the master of the Shen Manor. It was no longer just an act of repaying a debt, it was true acceptance. I gradually adapted to life in the Prime Minister's manor. Even though the matron was strict, I understood this was the foundation for establishing myself, so I studied even more diligently. Seeing my rapid progress, Madame Shen's gaze held increasing approval, and she treated me with growing affection. Bella truly treated me like her blood-related little sister, always remembering to share anything delicious or beautiful she received. Occasionally, through the gossip of the servants or in conversations between Madame Shen and the matron, I would overhear fragmented pieces of news about the Lin family. I heard that after Aunt Lin received the 20 taels of silver from Madame Shen Tan for her daughter, she planned to rest well during her pregnancy to ensure the birth of a son. Unexpectedly, Sylvia refused to do any work at home. She spent all day complaining that the food was bland, her clothes were tattered, and she constantly argued with her mother, always retorting, "If it weren't for me, where would you get the silver to spend?" Our aunt became so enraged that it endangered her pregnancy, forcing her to spend more than half of that silver to hire a doctor to stabilize it. Despite all this, our aunt had never considered selling her own daughter to a pleasure house. But Sylvia sold herself. When I learned this truth, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This news was brought back by the stewardess matron close to Madame Shen. She had been overseeing procurements and passed through the old street, where she happened upon this strange piece of news. "That Miss Lin," the stewardess matron said, her voice calm but unable to hide her disdain, "went to find the madam of the Baiwa pavilion herself. She claimed her family was poor and she was willingly selling herself. She only asked for 50 taels of silver to build a house, and insisted she would definitely become their greatest money maker." I was practicing my calligraphy when I heard this. My hand froze and a drop of black ink fell onto the rice paper, spreading outward. She sold herself. Did she truly not know what a cruel and unforgiving place the Baiwa Pavilion, and the entire world of pleasure, truly was? Did she not know how much blood, sweat and humiliation was piled up behind the title of #1 courtesan? No, she knew. She was just too impatient. She was in a hurry to escape poverty, in a hurry to grasp at glory, and in a hurry to prove that even without the status of the Prime Minister's daughter, she could still ascend to the heavens on her own. She only saw the radiant glory of my life when Prince Duan noticed me and bought my freedom. She conveniently forgot the nights I was beaten, the grueling training, the humiliation of forcing smiles while dealing with all manner of men. She especially forgot how many of our sisters had died silent deaths in the dry wells of the pavilion's back courtyard. After listening, Madame Shen frowned and sighed. That child. Her heart is ultimately not righteous. Her mother, despite her greed, never once thought of selling her own daughter. Yet she. Madame Shen looked at me, her gaze complex. "Clara, do you have any idea what kind of place that is?" I set down my brush, lowered my eyes, and replied, softly, "I have heard of it. Place. It is far worse than not respectable. It is a living hell for women." Madame Shen's voice turned stern. "You must remember this clearly. No matter what, protecting your purity and self-respect is the root of your standing in this world. All shortcuts inevitably lead to ruin." "I will remember mother's teachings," I answered obediently, but in my heart, I felt a deep unease. "Sylvia, you rushed so eagerly to jump into that pit of fire. Did you truly believe that was the path to the clouds, the way to become the prince's favored concubine? Very well. In that case, I will let you taste for yourself just how many thorns cover that path, and what price you must pay." Sylvia did possess some cunning, and she retained fragmented memories from her past life. She knew a few of the popular songs and poems, and so it wasn't long before she made a small name for herself in the Baihoa Pavilion. Known as Miss Nellie, Miss Delicate, she attracted a number of scholars and wealthy young masters who fancied themselves elegant. But that was the extent of it. How could a man of Prince Dawn's stature easily involve himself in such a place? Even if he did, the women he sought would be the top-tier courtesans or the most famous, established beauties. Sylvia's meager talents and her desperate attempts to latch onto nobility appeared clumsy and vulgar in the eyes of those seasoned in the world of pleasure. She struggled for a long time, but never met the great benefactor she imagined. On the contrary, her arrogance led her to offend the other prominent courtesans in the pavilion, resulting in her being suppressed and bullied both openly and secretly. The madam of the pavilion, seeing that Sylvia was not bringing in the profits she had expected, grew cold toward her, even beginning to force her to entertain the crude, wealthy patrons she despised. When this news reached my ears, I felt no satisfaction. I only found it ironic and somewhat tragic. This was the path she had chosen, and she would naturally have to bear the consequences. The next time I saw Sylvia was at a polo match held at the royal villa. I attended as the second young miss of the Prime Minister's manor, accompanying my sister, Bella. We sat in the viewing stands with an excellent view, surrounded by other noble ladies and young misses, all chatting and laughing. Below on the field, talented young noblemen rode swift horses, swinging their mallets to strike the ball. Their heroic and handsome postures drew continuous cheers from the crowd. Bella was completely engrossed, excitedly pulling at my sleeve while giving a constant stream of commentary. I smiled and nodded along, my gaze idly sweeping over the servants offering tea and snacks at the edge of the field. Suddenly, I caught sight of a familiar figure. Although she was wearing the coarse uniform of a servant, her head bowed obediently as she carried a tray, I recognized her in an instant. It was Sylvia. Why was she here? A courtesan from the Baihoa Pavilion would absolutely not be permitted to serve at a royal banquet of this scale. Unless she had found a way to sneak in. My suspicion was quickly confirmed. As one round of the match ended, several princes and royals dismounted to rest, walking toward their private tents. Sylvia's figure, weaving through the busy servants like a fish in water, swiftly approached a middle-aged man in royal robes. He had a calm and steady demeanor. It was Prince Dawn, the man who had bought my freedom and made me his concubine in our last life. My heart tightened slightly. I watched as Sylvia pretended to trip, letting out a small ah, as the tray of cold tea and water in her hands fell straight toward Prince Dawn. If it had hit him, the cold water wouldn't have burned, but it would have been enough to cause an embarrassing and rude scene. Fortunately, the guard at Prince Dawn's side was quick as lightning. He instantly struck the tray, shattering it. The cups broke apart with a sharp, clattering sound, and the cold water splashed onto the hem of the prince's robe and his boots. The scene instantly fell silent. All eyes flew to this sudden accident. Sylvia immediately dropped to the ground, prostrating herself. Her body trembled, but her voice was pitched just right, laced with a sob and a sense of panic. "Your Highness, spare my life. This servant did not mean to. This servant deserves death." She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, presenting a pitiful sight. Her carefully made-up face did indeed possess a certain beauty. She probably thought all men, especially powerful ones, would be moved by such a coincidental encounter with a damsel in distress. But she miscalculated two things. First, this was a royal banquet with an extremely strict protocol. Any attempt at social climbing was considered utterly ridiculous and detestable. Second, the one thing Prince Juan despised most was this exact kind of obvious, self-satisfied seduction attempt. In my past life, I had captured his attention not just with beauty and talent, but more importantly, with the clear-headedness and moderation I maintained in that sordid world. A rarity that was enough to pique curiosity of a man like Prince Dawn, unlike this sort of low-class fawning. Sure enough, Prince Dawn's brows furrowed immediately. His gaze turned icy, and he didn't spare the kneeling girl a single glance. He only said flatly to the guard beside him, "Where did this insolent servant come from? Daring to offend a royal guest. Drag her away. Find out which household she belongs to, and punish them severely without mercy. Your Highness, spare me." Sylvia completely panicked, never expecting this outcome. She hastily raised her head, wanting to say more, but the guards had already gagged her and dragged her forcefully from the field. The surrounding nobles, began to whisper amongst themselves. Their words filled with mockery and contempt. She doesn't know her own limits, daring to pull a stunt in front of the prince. Her face is unfamiliar. She must be one of the lower servants with no manners. She was probably dreaming of climbing to a high branch. How ridiculous. Bella also pouted, whispering to me, "That servant is truly audacious. She clearly doesn't know fear, to even try something on Prince Duan." It seemed Bella did not have a high opinion of Prince Duan either. After the polo match concluded, on the way back to the manor, I used the excuse of needing fresh air and asked the carriage driver to stop for a moment at an intersection 1 street away from the Shen Manor. Just as I expected, I didn't have to wait long before I saw Sylvia walking in a daze, her hair disheveled. She had clearly just been punished, her movements were stiff, and her face was streaked with drying tears, bearing a look of deep resentment and humiliation. She saw me too. In this moment, the gulf between us was as wide as the sky and the earth. I sat inside the opulent, decorated carriage of the Prime Minister's manor, dressed in fine silks and brocades, wearing jade hairpins, my complexion healthy, my bearing graceful, and she, having just been, punished and expelled for her clumsy seduction attempt, was disheveled and covered in dust. The stark contrast made her eyes instantly turn bloodshot, a raw flame of jealousy and hatred burning within them, as if she wanted to devour me whole. "Clara Lynn," she shrieked, rushing toward my carriage window. "You came here just to laugh at me, didn't you?" I looked at her calmly and spoke softly. "Cousin, this is the path you chose for yourself. In the Biowa Pavilion, you could have at least relied on your small talents to make a living. But this ambition to climb, especially using these methods, will only lead to your eternal damnation. Prince Duan is not someone you can trifle with. If you had given up earlier, perhaps there would still be a way out for you." "Shut up," she screamed, cutting me off, her face twisting into a crazed smile. "Don't you stand there and preach your false benevolence. You think you're so great now that you're the young lady of the Shen Manor. You're nothing but a wild weed that's stolen a phoenix's nest. Just you wait. I will stomp you under my heel. The prince's favored concubine can only be me. What right do you have to lecture me? Who do you think you are?" Her words were chaotic and venomous. I knew that any advice given to her now would only be perceived as mockery. She was completely blinded by the memories of her past life and her overwhelming resentment. She couldn't see the foolishness of her own actions. She could only blame fate for being unfair and blame me for stealing everything that was hers. I looked at her, and finally said only one thing: "Take care of yourself." Then I signaled for the driver to move on. The carriage began to roll forward, leaving her malicious glare and her curses behind me. I leaned back against the soft cushion and closed my eyes. In my past life, in that princely manor which was as deep and perilous as the sea, the favor I received looked glorious on the surface, but in reality, every step was fraught with terror, like walking on thin ice. Prince Dawn. As a member of the royal family, talk of true feelings and love was a joke. There was only fleeting desire that faded as quickly as beauty. Furthermore, his dark, unspeakable proclivities were enough to make one's blood run cold. In this life, I wanted nothing to do with Prince Dawn. I wanted only to avoid him. Yet Sylvia was desperately, clinging to him. In the end, she finally found her chance. When Prince Duan was attacked by assassins, Sylvia threw herself in front of him and took a knife for him. "Your Highness," her voice was as weak as silk, forcing a smile she believed was tragic and moving. As long as you are unharmed, I am content." A flicker of barely perceptible disgust crossed Prince Duan's eyes. He had seen far too many these life-saving performances. It was impossible to tell which were real and which were staged. However, under the public's gaze, he had to maintain appearances and acknowledge her bravery. He spoke indifferently, ordering his men to carry her back, summon a doctor, and use the medicines to treat her wound. It was just a single sentence, but to Sylvia, it was like music from the heavens. Having held on until this moment, she fainted upon hearing his words, a look of profound satisfaction still on her face. When this news reached the Shen Manor, I was arranging flowers with Bella. Bella clicked her tongue softly. "Well, I suppose she finally got her wish. Countless women in this capital adore Prince Dawn, but I certainly do not." I raised an eyebrow. "Why is that? Do you have any idea how many concubines are in Prince Dawn's manor?" Bella pursed her lips. To this day he still has no official princess consort, because no one is willing to marry their daughter to him. It's said that every month, several servant girls disappear from his manor without a trace. That was right, Everyone knew Prince Duan was not a man worth marrying. His residence looked like a luxurious palace, but it was, in fact, an exquisite golden cage, one that concealed a deadly aura. In my past life, I was able to survive in that place only because I had already been forged in the hell of the Baiwa pavilion. My heart was like iron. I knew how to conceal myself, how to use my appearance and talents to protect my life. I also knew that when his sickness emerged, with those perverse and grotesque pleasures, I had to cleverly offer up other maids or servants to take my place. Only by doing so could I barely survive and win the title of favored concubine. Sylvia only saw me at banquets, draped in magnificent silks. She never saw me waking up from nightmares every night, trembling as I listened to the tragic screams echoing from the back courtyard. With her naive ambition and clumsy schemes, if she truly stepped foot into that place, I fear she would die without ever knowing how it happened. In the end, Sylvia used her so-called life-saving grace to be brought into Prince Duan's manor. She was not a trakfi, not even a concubine. At first, she was just a benefactor, with an ambiguous status, sent to a remote corner of the manor to recover. Yet she believed she had already taken a great leap toward her goal. The moment her wound began to heal, she grew restless. Relying on that debt of gratitude, she tried to imitate the path I had once taken to win favor, inquiring about Prince Duan's preferences. She recited poetry, she sang songs, she even attempted to recreate the very drum dance that had made me famous. But it was like trying to draw a tiger and ending up with a dog. What kind of man was Prince Duan? He had seen countless beauties and endless talents. Sylvia's clumsy imitation was, in his eyes, merely vulgar and amusing. Her obvious eagerness to compete for favor and her naked ambition only made Prince Duan grow more disgusted. The few times he summoned her, it was only as a passing amusement, his words laced with mockery and scrutiny. The other women in the prince's harem were all seasoned players. Seeing that Sylvia was not favored and had no backing, they immediately began to suppress and torment her at every turn. Her life there was 100 times more miserable than her days as a goddaughter in the Shen Manor. Only then did she vaguely realize that this path was not as glorious as she had imagined. But she had no way to retreat. She could only grit her teeth and continue to claw her way upward. Our aunt, having heard from some unknown source that her daughter had latched onto a prince, immediately dragged her sickly body and her precious son to the back gates of Prince Duan's manor, wailing and demanding to see her daughter, and demanding silver. Sylvia was both terrified and furious. She was afraid that if Prince Duan found out she had such destitute and wretched relatives, he would despise her even more. She took out the last of her private money, intending to send them away. But Aunt Lin, complaining the amount was too little, caused a massive scene right at the manor gates, screaming and cursing, "You ungrateful wretch! If it weren't for me, do you think you'd be where you are today? Now that you've clung to a rich man, you abandon your own mother and brother. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Everyone, come and see this injustice." The commotion alerted the manor's stewards. Prince Duan valued his reputation above all else. This matter was immediately reported to him. His face turned so dark it looked like it could drip water. He was already sick of Sylvia, and now her tactless relatives had shown up at his door, which was no different from a slap to his face. If they miss her so much, he ordered coldly, then let them be reunited. Our aunt and Sylvia's younger brother were invited into the manor and placed in the same remote courtyard as Sylvia. Outwardly, this was called an act of grace, but in reality, it was imprisonment. At first, Aunt Lin was overjoyed, thinking she had come to enjoy a life of luxury. She marveled at the manor's furnishings and even started ordering Sylvia around like she was the grand madam. But she quickly realized something was wrong. They were not allowed to leave. Their food and living conditions were hardly better than what they had outside. The matron assigned to watch them had an face of ice and treated them with open contempt. When Sylvia's brother demanded to go out and play or asked for better food, he was slapped so hard he fell to the ground. Only then did our aunt begin to feel terrified, clutching her son and trembling, living every day in fear. Sylvia stared at the mother and son who had dragged her even deeper into this hell, her eyes gradually becoming hollow and frantic. The breaking point arrived swiftly. One night, Prince Duan, having faced setbacks at court, was frustrated and drank himself into a stupor. He stumbled into Sylvia's courtyard by mistake. He saw the three of them huddled in the yard, and he focused on Sylvia's face, twisted as it was with fear and resentment, and a malevolent impulse rose in him. Using his drunkenness as an excuse, he unleashed a torrent of vile insults and mockery. Then, right in front of Aunt Lynn, her brother, and the servants, he began to tear at Sylvia's clothes. Sylvia's mind, already unstable, finally snapped. All the humiliation of her past life, all the fear, the resentment, and the venom of this life erupted at once. She yanked a sharp silver hairpin from her hair and stabbed it directly at Prince Dawn. Simultaneously, she kicked him with all her strength in his lower body, while her hand frantically drove the pin into him again and again. You die. All of you die. Why do you all look down on me? Why? The position of favored concubine is mine. The glory is mine. All of it is mine. Ha-ah. Prince Dawn had no time to react. He was struck in his vital area, and the agonizing pain caused him to howl. He collapsed to the ground, instantly sober, his face ashen. Only then did the guards and matrons snap out of their shock, rushing in to restrain the maddened Sylvia. Prince Dawn was rushed back to his main quarters. The royal physicians hurried to examine him, and their diagnosis horrified everyone. The prince had been severely injured in his lower body. Though his life was saved, it was feared he would be unable to perform his manly duties for the rest of his life. Sylvia immediately had all 4 of her limbs broken and was thrown into the darkest dungeon. She had lost her mind completely, muttering non-stop nonsense. One moment she would scream, "I am the prince's favored concubine." The next she would curse, "Clara Lynn, may you die a horrible death." And the next she would weep and beg for mercy. But no matter what she said, it could not change her fate. A few days later, after a round of extreme torture, she died quietly. Her corpse was tossed into the mass graves. As for the Lynn family, they bore the calamity of extermination. Prince Dawn's rage and the royal family's honor had to be cleansed with blood. On the day of the execution, blood flowed freely in the marketplace. Not long after, Prince Dawn, unable to endure the profound humiliation, also stopped breathing in his sickbed. With that, the pain of drowning, the struggles of my past life, finally began to fade. The surface of the lake in my memory at last grew still. When I looked up, I saw only a vast, cloudless blue sky, as clear and bright as the life that now lay before me. I continued to live in the Prime Minister's Shen Manor, quietly and peacefully. There was no more scheming, no more harm, no more constant gazes stabbing my back like needles. Madame Shen grew to love me as if I were her own flesh and blood. Bella, despite her sharp tongue, was often happier than I was whenever I received praise. A piece of cake, a new piece of jewelry. She thought of me first in all matters, big or small. I studied diligently and behaved with caution, step by step earning my place through my own modesty and wisdom. I no longer needed to sell my body for glory. I no longer needed to rely on the gazes of others to determine my worth. I was myself, Clara Lynn. Not a false young lady but a truly loved and properly educated daughter, one who could walk proudly into the future. Someone once asked me if I still wanted revenge. I just smiled. All debts have been paid. Those who pushed me into the abyss were ultimately consumed by their own greed and ignorance. I didn't need to lift a finger. True light does not need to trample on the blood of others to shine. That spring, the peach blossoms bloomed across the capital. To the sound of the opening drums, Bella and I walked arm in arm into the most prestigious women's academy. Ahead of us was the sunlight. It was the path I had chosen. It was the new life that I deserved. This was no longer the broken dream of a past life. This was this life, a lifetime of peace, lived with my head held high. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like,